Ever since their creation in September 1963, the X-Men have been an unquestionable cornerstone of the Marvel Universe, with decades upon decades of classic and beloved stories. Whether it's the original Stan Lee and Jack Kirby series from the mid-1960s, Chris Claremont's near-definitive 17-year run on the title, or the recent Jonathan Hickman relaunch, the X-Men have had no shortage of high-profile and iconic moments. However, when it comes to the most important periods in the X-Men's history, there are, to me, few writers whose work has left such a long-lasting impact on the team as Grant Morrison. Morrison, who took over the X-Men comic in July of 2001, relaunching it as New X-Men, revolutionised the beloved ensemble in a way not seen since Chris Claremont first took over in 1975, bringing characters such as Charles Xavier, Wolverine and Cyclops firmly into the 21st century, as well as adding many new characters, concepts and dimensions to the X-Men's long-standing status quo, and bringing with it a much-needed modernisation and a fresh approach to the storytelling. So in this video, I want to explain the state of the X-Men comic book series prior to Morrison's introduction in 2001, how the writer sought to revolutionise and update the X-Men team, and what the long-term impact of their 3-year run on the X-Men series was, and how the new X-Men have continued to inform and inspire the team's wider perception within media today. Before we continue though, just a quick reminder to leave a like on this video if you enjoy it, and subscribe to Owen Likes Comics so you don't miss out on any future videos. So in order to understand the significance of Morrison's X-Men series, I think it's first important to outline what the state of the X-Men comics were prior to his arrival. You see, Chris Claremont had revolutionised the X-Men during his 17-year run on the title, creating many of the team's most iconic stories and the lineup that would become the staple for future versions of the team. However, by 1991, Marvel were keen on revamping the X-Men once again, launching a new sister series to the long-standing Uncanny X-Men book and splitting the team into two distinct factions. This revamp would extend to the creative teams that worked on the series as well, with Claremont leaving the title soon after following disagreements with the X-Men group editor Bob Harras. In Claremont's place came Scott Lobdell and Fabian Nicieza, whose tenure saw a focus on major status quo changes and large-scale crossovers such as Executioner's Song, Fatal Attractions and Age of Apocalypse. While these stories did prove to be successful, by the late 1990s the X-Men stock had begun to fall, with many fans beginning to miss the character-led introspective stories that came to define Claremont's time on the series. It's worth noting, I think, that Chris Claremont's exit from the X-Men comics was far from amicable, with the writer telling the Bard Observer,
"I basically left because of substantial, irreconcilable differences with the editor. You're not your own boss when you're doing licensed material. You're subject to restrictions. That's the joy of licensing. It's someone looking over your shoulder. The book I wrote is dead. The characters are dead. The easiest way to think of X-Men and Uncanny X-Men is as if the series was cancelled."
In an attempt to regain some of the success of years prior, Claremont would be brought back to write both of the main X-Men comics in May of 2000, heading up a line-wide relaunch named Revolution. Now, the idea behind Revolution was to pick up 6 months after the previous storylines, and put the spotlight on characters that wouldn't usually be showcased in the main X-Men comics. Despite Claremont's return though, the response to Revolution was largely negative. As such, Marvel decided it was time to instead look to the future, searching for a writer who could bring something truly new and unique to the X-Men series. They identified Grant Morrison, a writer who had recently revitalised the Justice League for DC. As such, Morrison was hired to take over the X-Men title in May of 2001, renaming their self-titled series to New X-Men. Almost from the very beginning, it became clear that Morrison aimed to drag the mutant team firmly into the 21st century. As Morrison explained in the original pitch for the series,
"In the last decade or so, the tendency at Marvel has been intensely conservative. Comics like the X-Men have gone from freewheeling, overdriven pop to cautious, dodgy retro. What was dynamic becomes static. Dead characters always return. Nothing that happens really matters ultimately. To make the X-Men feel fresh once more, we need to take a closer, harsher look at what's not working in this book, and the comics field in general. The recent X-Men stuff has been written in an old-fashioned, overdense style for one, and we need to update, streamline, and demystify the storytelling techniques considerably to appeal to modern sensibilities."
With this in mind, it was clear that Morrison sought to completely overhaul the entire X-Men series, and once New X-Men issue 114 hit shelves in July of 2001, it became apparent that the X-Men would never be the same again. From the very first page of New X-Men issue 114, it became clear that a brand new era had dawned for the mutant heroes. The comic opens with one of the most striking images imaginable, with Cyclops beaming the severed head of a sentinel as Wolverine slashes its back from above. Noticeably, the pair aren't dressed in their traditional costumes, instead wearing sleek black and yellow uniforms. Everything suddenly feels different, and instead of gradually changing the status quo throughout their run, Morrison chose to instead throw readers straight into the deep end, wasting no time to introduce their version of what the X-Men are going to be. This first issue mostly sets up what would become the first major storyline of the Morrison era, E is for Extinction, which introduces a brand new villain in Cassandra Nova. Nova, revealed to be Xavier's long-lost sister, was devised to be an antagonist unlike anyone the X-Men had faced before, and made an immediate impact in the story, discovering a long-lost Sentinel factory and sending an army of Sentinels to massacre the entire population of Genosha, killing 16 million mutants. This event sent shockwaves throughout the entire X-Men world, and became the foundational piece that all of Morrison's future stories would be built from, with the final page of New X-Men issue 116 showing Charles Xavier publicly outing himself as a mutant for the first time. From here, Morrison would focus on the long-term ramifications of what happened in Genosha, combined with how Xavier going public about his mutant identity would affect the X-Men and the Xavier Institute. Namely, Morrison placed a renewed focus on the Institute being a flourishing school once again, showcasing brand new students and even dealing with stories such as a riot within the school and the emergence of a new mutant drug, Kick. Morrison would also return to the interpersonal drama that had defined Chris Claremont's X-Men series, with one of the more polarizing aspects of this run being the revelation of Cyclops' psychic affair with Emma Frost. This love triangle, which would run throughout the majority of the New X-Men series, would shake the team to their very core, with Scott temporarily quitting the X-Men before being convinced to return by Wolverine, and Emma seemingly being killed by Esme of the Stepford Cuckoos, only for Jean to use the Phoenix Force to resurrect her. Eventually, these tensions within the X-Men would reach fever pitch during the Planet X storyline, where Zorn, one of the new students introduced earlier in the series, attacks Professor X and reveals himself to be Magneto, who is believed to have been killed on Genosha. After trapping Xavier in suspended animation, Magneto would take to the streets of New York, killing waves of civilians and amassing an army to take control of the city. The X-Men who were stranded on asteroid M at this time are rescued by Jean Grey, who, after being stabbed by Wolverine, allowing her to fully merge with the Phoenix Force once again, returns the heroes to Earth, where they rescue Professor Xavier and confront Magneto. Here, it's revealed that while posing as Zorn, Magneto became addicted to the drug Kick, causing his mental state to rapidly deteriorate. As he wears Zorn's helmet to taunt the X-Men, Magneto begins to break down, as his followers abandon him and both humans and mutants unite unite to stand against him. Sensing defeat, Magneto falls to the ground, but as Jean Grey approaches him, he shoots her with a lethal electromagnetic pulse. Scott runs towards Jean, holding her in his arms as the pair reconcile. In her final words, Jean professes her love to Cyclops, but begs him to move on and live a happy life after she's gone. As Jean passes away, Magneto finally realises just what he has done, crying out that he would rather be dead than be viewed a fraud by his own people. Consumed by rage, Wolverine obliges and decapitates Magneto in cold blood. This somber note, brought to life in the pages of New X-Men issue 150, served to be the climax of Morrison's X-Men series. Morrison would continue to write the comic for another 3 issues, penning the dystopian future storyline Here Comes Tomorrow, with the lasting final image of their entire run being Cyclops mourning the loss of Jean Grey, as he's comforted by Emma Frost, with the pair vowing to rebuild the X-Men and continue to fight for mutant equality and justice in the memory of those that they have lost. Despite how dark some of the stories in between may have been, Morrison concluded New X-Men with a moment of hopeful optimism towards the future. In the face of all of the hardships the various heroes experienced over the past 3 years, the X-Men would emerge from them emboldened, ready and waiting for whatever the future would bring. Today, New X-Men is regarded as one of the most important comic book runs of the century, a series which managed to successfully reinvent and inject new life into a team of superheroes who had grown stagnant and stale throughout the past decade. Alongside superstar artists like Frank Whiteley, Phil Jimenez and Mark Silvestri, Grant Morrison dragged the X-Men firmly into the 21st century and allowed them to do something they should have always have done: evolve. Evolution plays a major role throughout the entirety of this series, influencing not only the creative decisions behind the scenes, but also the stories and characters themselves. Early on in New X-Men, Morrison establishes the concept of secondary mutations, with both Beast and Emma Frost developing new powers as the mutant gene evolves. And even characters who don't experience secondary mutations are able to grow and change in other ways. For instance, Charles Xavier publicly outs himself as a mutant and uses his influence to help mutants in need around the world. Wolverine finally regains the memories of his life before the Weapon X program, and Cyclops learns to let go and live a life beyond mourning Jean Grey, accepting his role as the true leader of the X-Men. Even the wider mutant population were able to evolve as well, with Morrison establishing distinct mutant subcultures and dealing with problems such as cultural appropriation, as well as introducing a mutant-only area of New York, District X. It's quite ironic given the name of the failed relaunch that happened prior to their arrival, but Morrison's X-Men was nothing short of a revolution, maintaining the core principles that have guided the X-Men since 1963, but rebuilding everything around them almost from the ground up, creating a brand new version of the team that felt both familiar and distinctly new. As Zachary Jenkins described in an article for Comics XF,
by living outside of a comfort zone, Grant saw the obvious solution to the X-Men's problems. Their biggest fans weren't kids obsessed with a cartoon or action figures. They had grown up, and it was time for the X-Men to do the same.
Much like Claremont did decades prior and Jonathan Hickman would do years later, Grant Morrison gave the X-Men the chance to grow. Characters would change throughout their experiences in the comic, and these changes would matter in the long term. From the first page of their run to the very last, readers were made to feel like they were in uncharted territory. Almost anything could happen, and that makes for a fascinating comic book series. In short, New X-Men will always be one of my all-time favourite comic book runs, and one I think holds a special place in both the history of the X-Men and Marvel Comics as a whole. While not every decision made throughout this series lands, and many of the grand changes Morrison made were backtracked in subsequent years, the legacy of New X-Men is unquestionable, as the way the team were presented from then on were always, at least in some way, inspired by Morrison's radical reinvention. From the live-action X-Men films to animated animated shows such as X-Men Evolution, and even Jonathan Hickman's ongoing X-Men revamp, many of these modern iterations of the team owe a great deal to the new X-Men. And with that in mind, coupled with the continued praise that this comic book series continues to receive almost 2 decades after it began, I think it's clear to say that Grant Morrison did truly save and redefine the X-Men as we know them today. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to leave a like on the video and leave a comment down below as well. Let me know your thoughts on everything we talked about in today's video, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say as always. If you're new to Owen Likes Comics, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notify bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. And if you enjoyed this video and you want some more, there should be some others on screen right now that you might also enjoy. If you want to help support the channel and help me make more videos, you can go to patreon.com/OwenLikesComics. And if you want some more of me, you can follow me on Twitter, just at OwenLikesComics. That's all for this video though. Again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. So until then, take care and keep reading.